We have had a wonderful day of 3D audio microphone recording and mixing talks, and it will continue tomorrow. And three of the talks that are to be tomorrow, the presenters we have here as well. So you haven't seen all of them today already, and we also have two guests that have no talk, and for that reason they will very quickly introduce their stuff here. But I leave it now to my distinguished panelists to very shortly introduce themselves so that we know whom we are talking with. Will you want to start, Mike?
Will I want to start? Yeah. Maybe I'll try.
Well, that's working all right. Yes. I think this lot have seen so much of me today that they really want to know anything about me anymore. I've already done two presentations. I'm absolutely fagged out. So my name's Mike Williams, and I play around with microphones and microphone arrays, and the best of luck.
Okay. As my name is Lasse Nipko, I'm from Switzerland, and I make many 3D recordings. I also have chocolate here, if someone... No. But I make many recording 3D, and main topic of me is psychoacoustic, also, that I have a look about what you have to do for good sounding result, and I will also have tomorrow a workshop about that.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Tom Parnell. I'm an audio engineer for BBC Radio and relatively new to 3D mixing. I've been on attachment to the research and development team at BBC since February. So it's been a real treat playing with 3D microphone arrays and mixing in 3D. But I've got 15 years of stereo production in classical music mainly, and some drama behind me already.
Well, my name is Georg Budicek. I'm a recording engineer from Vienna. My main working field is classic music recording, but I also do a lot of TV production. And space has always been very interesting to me because we have some of the most beautiful concert halls in Vienna. And to capture this space as vivid as possible, I think is one of the main goals. And of course, if you ever have sat in a stadium and experienced the crowd going wild around you, and to be able to transport this maybe into a living room at Sunday, these are the goals we are working for.
Thank you. Edo?
Yes, hello, I'm Edo Groot. I'm a member of Polyhymnian International, and my colleagues and I work mainly on classical music for SACD and CD and video and cinema live. I'm doing a lot of multi-channel production since 2000 for SACD, and now I'm looking into how to expand that into more than 5 channels, and that's why I'm sitting here.
Hello, I'm Kimi Hamasaki from Coming Group Japan. I'm a recording engineer, also the researcher, especially in the spatial audio, also, and develop some audio system like a 22.2, also some recording techniques, and I'm quite happy that many 3D audio events or recording happen here, and it's great. Thanks.
Ja, Felix Anriesens aus Berlin, Sound Designer, Sound Recordist, field sound recordist and production sound recordist for film, and me and my colleague Moritz Hoffmeister, we started to develop a microphone setup for 3D audio recording 4 years ago, and I think we're on the stage for it right now that we can start to produce ambience libraries and field recording libraries, and sell them for VR and cinema market. Do you want to add something?
We started on, we closely work with Dolby because we come from movie business, so we started
checking for Dolby Atmos, and this what we show you is like our recording setup, which we specially developed for Dolby Atmos. Is it a good point to show maybe?
No, it's too early. We get
All right.
We get there.
All right.
We have a lot of things to come to. Before we are talking about microphone setups in detail, I think it's very important to prepare a bit the basis for what are we doing that, and are we doing it at all at the moment. So my first questions to you guys at the moment, you see that these are from different fields, and even I skipped 2 or 3 other fields that are important as well. In your daily work, what role does 3D audio play in the work you do for customers, and the work you do actually for people that pay for it? And what formats are you working on actually? Not everyone might have an answer, but I'm very interested. Where are we at the moment? Could you shortly comment on that? Mike?
You're looking at me?
Yes. Or we start from this direction this time, because they already might have a concrete application. Felix?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the advent of Dolby Atmos in Germany, also or 3D, but for us personally, Dolby Atmos is a very important step towards immersive audio for a broader audience. And
Do you have customers?
yes and no. We meet a lot of people. If we tell them what we're doing, they say, okay, what do they need this for? And as soon as we start to show them, they're becoming convinced, and they believe this could be something to invest time and money into. But this is obviously a growing market, and I think even bigger might be the VR market, virtual reality market, because cinema, I think cinema might turn out to be a comparatively small market compared to the VR market in the end. So I think, yeah.
And your approach to that business model is preparing archive recordings?
Exactly. Yes.
Good. Kimyo?
My role is, first of all, the recordings, and actually I'm doing Auro 3D, also 22.2, or some other channel-based recording. And second role is international standardization to make some common platform for 3D audio worldwide. And third role is research and development to make bring the 3D audio into the home. So this is I'm working.
I know that in Japan it's not only theory, it is prepared practice. So I think we will have we have the decision that we will have 22.2 and super high vision video soon, and for that reason it will be practiced soon, right?
Not soon, now, because we started from 1st of August. So now in Japan, we have air coming from 20.2 coming from the satellite to the home. Unfortunately, there is no receiver yet. So probably within 2 years, receiver will be ready, and 8K monitors and 20.2.
Thank you. Edo?
Well, I've been lucky that since the start of SACD, a lot of customers that we work for, which are classical labels mainly, have been interested and are still interested in releasing 5.1 or 5.0 surround sound version of the recording, although I think the main aim is still the stereo mix for them to sell. At the moment, we are trying to convince them to listen to this extra dimension with the high channels. And like before, when we started to do demonstrations with stereo and then show that people how 5.1 can sound with the same music and same recordings, when people hear it, they are convinced usually about the qualities and that it sounds much better. They don't see a commercial model at the moment yet, so I think all of us in the business have to find a way to attract the people that produce and sell and distribute audio and music, want to do it in this format, and that's not general practice yet.
How was your business model when going from stereo to 5.1? Was that as difficult?
At that time, the big labels were not interested, and it was very much pushed in the beginning by Sony and Philips to establish the format. So we were in a position to do a lot of demonstrations and assist colleagues with recording techniques and equipment. And I think my demonstration here earlier was not ideal. I didn't manage to tune my recordings to this hole, this room. At that time we went out with a very good setup with 5 great BMW loudspeakers with a lot of acoustic material, and we went to many different places in the world where we consistently were able to play back on a high quality level, and that's not happening at the moment as much, at least not to my knowledge.
Well, I'm doing surround recordings probably as long as you, but usually I'm doing them for my own pleasure because my customers are not really into SACD. So it's always a pity to switch the left-right button on the mixing console and then falls back into the stereo image. Yes, so the market for music is very small at the moment if you're not talking to the very specialized labels, because the major labels, they are happy with the CD, they're happy with HD download, and that's about it. Only very few see the potential or want to see a potential. Interestingly, discussion came up 2 weeks ago for a project I'm working on transforming the 3D audio into a binaural experience, because this is much easier distributable, of course, than the pure 3D audio as in Auro or whatever. So I think this might be the bigger idea for the moment. But still, you know, I love the audio, so I do every recording in surround, and I started to doing most of my recordings when time permits in 3D audio. In TV, it's a little bit different. Still, we're working to bring 3D audio to the widespread sports coverage, especially. Of course, the problem is here, how do we reach the end customer? At the moment, we have lots of people with standard TV sets. Very few people have an AV receiver with a 5.1 surround setup, and even less people have a 9-point-something setup. So we need to introduce something that's very easy to handle, to set up, and which has a high women's acceptance factor, that we can really have a broad audience. And I think those who have listened to 3D audio sports coverage are very well into our idea and really see what advantage it can have.
We have to say that we are talking here about the applications of 3D recording.
Yeah.
So of course there are a couple of applications which do not really apply spatial recording.
Yeah.
As we heard just before from Patrick, and is the cinema, and there's the games. So these are very important applications that are not properly distributed here on the stage, because they do not so much include a 3D recording. But of course that is a driving factor that we can use here. But you already talked about the step to VR. I think also Tom can comment on that. Your role in 3D.
I can't really talk about television, but since the advent of digital satellite and high definition terrestrial digital broadcasting, most television programs from the BBC are broadcasting 5.1. Radio is a slightly different matter in that it's been broadcasting in stereo for 50 years, and all its processes are based around that infrastructure. So it's very difficult to expand that at the moment. So in research and development, we're working on using binaural technology to get some sort of spatial content out to the audience. And the initial use of that in the last year or so has proved really, the audience is really interested in it. Having said that, we're using technologies, object-based mixing, object-based recording techniques to author that content, and that can take us anywhere in the future. So we can do a 3D mix that at the moment gets rendered for a binaural listener and can get distributed in 2 channels. But that 3D mix exists as an entity, so it can then be rendered to a 9.1 or a 3D or a 22.2 potentially in the future, when people have it in their homes, if people have it in their homes, or if people are just happy to put their headphones on and listen to binaural.
I think one important thing is the education, that we are ready to do good sounding recording, because it's very difficult to get a good result in this field. There are so many things you have to be careful if you make a recording that you get this good result, because only if we have a good result we are also able to sell it. If we only have more or less good sounding things, I think it's not so good to sell it.
What is the role of 3D in your daily work?
Yeah, it's more or less, I want to understand how it works, but it's not a business for me at the moment. I hope that it will be sometime, but not today.
And Mike, finally.
I'm afraid I don't work for anybody. I don't do any production. I spend my life just dreaming and thinking about why it works and can I improve it, can I get better sound? And quite frankly, for the last, I suppose it's 30 years, I've been in this situation where I'm just following my own instinct and doing lots of experiments with perception. I don't call it psychoacoustics because I feel that the word psychoacoustics has more or less been hijacked by the university people. So I now call it perception to get out of that situation. I have found in the past 30 or even more years that teaching is an absolute marvelous place to get inspiration and work with students, and we help each other along. They love to do this experimental work, and this gives me fresh ideas that I can follow up. But I have to admit, I don't do any production work at all. I don't have to satisfy any customers. I think the only customer, and she's fed up with it, is called my wife. But so I feel a bit out on a limb, and my only interest has been for years and years and years, just as you said, to understand, and then when one thinks to understand, to do the experiments so that you don't understand anymore, and then try and invent a method of working on the characteristics that I've found to produce systems, microphone arrays, which give very satisfactory results. I'm really at the service of these guys because they've got work to do for specific clients.
But what's the direction? Do you want to teach stuff that the others do not know that they need it yet? Or is it vice versa? The customers need something and they ask you, how shall I record it? Who's the driving force? I know that there are some people that are asking you some things, so there is some driving force from a customer.
I try to provide the tools that the sound engineer needs, but my problem is that, well, I first published a paper in 1991 to do with surround sound configurations, and it was only 16 years afterwards that people started to ask for configurations that actually applied this. So sorry, I don't want to sound pretentious, but I feel as if I'm about 15 years ahead of everybody, and I'll be probably dead and buried before anybody starts using the stuff I'm working on nowadays. But I am fascinated by just trying to understand. I've been a teacher for a long time, and this is just part of life, is experimentation, getting this to the students. And now, mostly, to be quite honest, I'm getting on a bit, just working on experimentation, trying to understand all the parameters concerned.
But maybe you're too pessimistic here, because I learned also from my daily practice, also my real job, that the speed of development here from 5.1 to 3D is much, much quicker than this from 2.0 to 5.1, because that took ages. But now we have a real, some more need from outside to get something running. And this is a matter of 2 or 3 years now only. So,
sorry, 1991 wasn't 2 or 3 years ago. And my paper,
you were far ahead of the time.
Published in the AES, and it was only a few years ago that 2 companies in France, the INA, a colleague in INA, who just happened to be one of my students, and Radio France asked me for tools which concerned simply 5.0, and how could they hold the microphones in place, and I provided them with the method of doing this. So this is why I think that the time span is absolutely incredible. But that's life.
Well, we have time. One important question when before we talk about microphone techniques is linked to that. What is, in terms of production, in terms of the quality of the recording, the step from 5.1 to 3D? What is the decisive step here in the format, and derived from that then in the recording? What do you think? Why do you do 3D and not 5.1? What is the main difference here?
I think there are 2 things that are very important. One is the feeling of the room, that you have the feeling that you are in the recording room. You have not this feeling in stereo and surround a little bit, but in 3D you have really the impression to be in a real room. Only if you close your eyes, you have the impression of this. And this is something very attractive. And the other thing is, if you have instruments in the front, you have the possibility to get a more natural sounding sound of the instruments. It is not possible if you have only one layer, horizontal layer. Only if you have 2 layers, you have the possibility to get this.
Okay, thanks. Tom? We will do short answers before
I'm
we
not
get
sure I
to
can
the
add
point.
anything.
Okay.
Well, one example where it really struck me the main difference between stereo 5.1 and 3D was in a chamber music recording. If we're looking at a standard string quartet recording in stereo, usually we have a very intimate sound. We're rather close to the ensemble, and even if we're recording in a good hall, we don't have a lot of ambient sound in the stereo recording. In a 5.1 recording, we can open up a little bit, but with the 3D, I can transport the feeling of the hall without losing the intimacy of the ensemble. And I think this is something very wonderful we can do now. We have another degree of flexibility, just depicting and painting our picture of sound.
Okay, thank you. Anyone to comment?
Yeah, I would like to add to that in a way that it also has a lot to do with resolution. If we listen to one loudspeaker, we hear that one loudspeaker as a source, and we definitely know that we're listening to a loudspeaker, and yet we can listen to the content that comes from that and accept it as a musical experience, but we know it's a picture from a loudspeaker in the room you're listening to. And with stereo, we lose a little bit of that confinement, because we get some localization and some aspects of the sounds that are there in real life, the relationship between the direct sound and the reflections, and immediately we get a different character and resolution of the orchestral or instrumental timbres. And this steps up with 5 channels and with a height again. So it becomes a much more convincing sound picture that allows you to hear with less problems, because for instance in a big orchestral recording you have orchestral groups that sound similar, cellos, low trombones, and with 2 sources or with 1 source it masks the sound into one. And this resolution in timbre is also extremely important, because that's what these musicians are actually doing in their performing, and is lost quite a lot in the recording process just by being having to listen to it through 1 or 2 sources in stereo, in 2 sources, and then we have to try to counteract that loss by artificial means, and adding more microphones and changing positions, and hopefully then we get a very convincing and beautiful sound picture, but it ends somewhere, and this limit is gone, and we suddenly have an enormous scope of sound and quality.
Errol, is immersion also an aim for you? Do you want the listener to be in that opera house, or is that
I think that
just
it helps immensely to, if the recording transports you acoustically to that sound, that you forget you are listening to the loudspeakers. You forget that you are listening to the room you're in, because you're always listening to all the reflections from your own room, because it's an immense comb filter effect from each loudspeaker. But it's worse with 2 loudspeakers than it's with to listen to than with more loudspeakers.
Thank you.
I think it's a very simple reason. We hear 3D sound naturally, so it should be 3D, and we don't want it to do 1D. And also in 1980s or 1970s, there's some very limited for transmission and recording, but we don't have enough limitation. For instance, 8K video needs a 95 gigabps, but 20.2 with linear piece only 29 megabps. So we should get the data from the video area, otherwise we have no feature.
We have to do it because we can.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I think it has all been said already. The only new thing maybe is that we are not recording in rooms, we're mostly recording outside of rooms, but still you have a lot more of depth. Like really you can hear signals that are far away, and you feel the depth in 3D. It's a deeper feeling for depth, and also you just have the feeling you're there. It's just you're there. That's a big advantage.
Let me also add one point, which is also very important. It's the listening area. If you add these loudspeakers, then you automatically increase the listening area. Because 5.1 was not the best format when we talk about listening area, because there were these surround loudspeakers, which you get close to very easily while sitting on the couch. And this has vanished a lot, so very practical advantage.
But yes, to just say something about the effect that it has on producers, particularly in the it's positive. We were asked to produce a binaural version of a big budget BBC One television drama in binaural as an experiment. It was A Midsummer Night's Dream, so the forest world came alive basically, potentially in 3D, and the dubbing mixer who'd been allocated to do it opened up his studio, and he spent a day setting up an object-based system. And he came in and he put his headphones on, and I showed him what the mouse could do with a 3D panner. And he grabbed a source and sort of moved it up and over and around him. And then he just put the mouse down, and I was thinking, what's wrong? Have I not told him how to do it properly? And he turned to look at me, and he had tears in his eyes. He was welling up with this new opportunity that he could pan stuff realistically anywhere, any source, anywhere around him. and it had that emotional impact on him. And I think producers really see that possibility in how people are going to listen to their products rather than just watch them.
Yeah. So let's discuss how to get there. Make the people cry. Regarding microphone techniques, of course there are a couple, numerous different techniques, and these techniques very much depend on the application. Maybe let's quickly look at your stuff that you have done, because you have compared different techniques, and this directly leads us into the topic of applying different techniques, which you will show also in your slide. So you are the only one without the presentation here, so you have to use these 2 minutes here to quickly introduce your work.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we compared 8 microphone systems, starting with 3 different first order ambisonic microphones, a higher order ambisonic microphone prototype. It's similar to the Eigenmic. We had a ORTF 3D by support of Schoeps. Thanks again for this. And we had a Williams tree together with an IRT cross on top, and our own system that consists of 7 spaced microphones for the mid layer and 2 microphones for the top layer, and we found a way to separate the 2 layers acoustically very much, and that's maybe an important feature of our system. We recorded ambience in Berlin, in the city, and maybe we can play it back. We have we brought with us 3 examples to compare the different setups. We have a Tetra mic recording here and ORTF 3D recording in our system. And maybe Detlef, if you be so kind. Thank you. Sorry, the first thing we hear is it's going to be. This is, by the way, this is our setup. We had like 77 channels to record, and we used a laptop and 6, 7, and 8 recorders. Yeah, it was a pretty big setup. Yeah, the first recording we're going to hear is going to be the Tetra mic. Okay, this was the first recording. It's just a short part of the session we took. I think what you might have noticed is that, I don't know, for us up here it hasn't been much of a pleasure because, yeah, we're sitting very close to the speakers. This is the way it sounds to decode an ambisonic recording, first order ambisonic recording for a larger room, and there are of course ways to tweak the playback system so certain characteristics of that special microphone are compensated, but that won't be the case if you record stuff for cinema or for anything else. You always have to cope with the customer's playback system, so yeah, that's the way it is. You might have noticed that the bicycle you heard kind of drove through the ceiling as well, which I think is a big problem with all smaller setups. And yeah, let's go to the Audio 3D next, please. Maybe the next recording, which is made by our setup right away, please. Is it okay if we add just a short compendium of like what do you call this? Short sample of other ambiences, we can call it.
Yeah.
Fun stuff. Okay. All right. Okay. Detlef, thanks.
That was a very good compilation of different ways to record that. And that directly leads me to the question to all our other panelists, how their recording techniques are chosen and how they look like. Because now we have heard a coincident microphone, we have heard a microphone, ambience microphone with small level and time differences, being the RTF 3D, and I guess your own technique was that in the picture, so using larger time differences for ambience recording. So can I ask the other panelists, how is their approach with regard to 3D audio microphone technique? Kim Young.
Depend on the productions. I use several types of recording. For instance, for sports recording, especially there is no space to put microphones. So and also needs a very deep feeling. So I would like to use Omni. So I have made a 65 centimeters bowl, divided acoustical buffer, and into that omnidirectional microphone. This spec is quite good, even Omni, but very higher frequency have a very good direction. So these steps also. Sonic microphone. If you need very tiny systems, Sonic is one good. For the orchestra recordings, I want to use a separate microphone array. One is mostly catching the reflection, the other is mostly catching the direct sound. And this must be quite easy for mixing for me.
You have told that you, for that reason, have developed a technique for recording this separate room sound, which is very similar to something which we in 5.1 call the Hamasaki square. So can it be called the Hamasaki cube now?
Someone called like that because it's
We will do
a
it.
cube.
And how does it look like?
Yeah, it's actually a cube, and 4 figure weight in the bottom cube square, and the top square is 4 supercardioid microphones facing top.
Okay, thank you. Hello.
Is it on? Yes. I'm always having to produce stereo 5.1 and now Auro in the same session, so I have to combine the different types of microphones. Less and less, or more and more, I can add to that for the different formats. Obviously, for Auro, I add 4 extra microphones that I don't use in any of the other mixes. And generally, we have based our recording techniques on 5 omnidirectional microphones, basically almost spaced as the speakers are. And this I do because I find it very disturbing when you add in a 5.1 or 5.0 mix, you make the rear louder, and actually it starts to sound like you add that to the front. In another way, that actually you don't get more envelopment, but you get less and more distant sound because you get a lot more indirect sound from the back. And at that time also you start to hear the rear loudspeakers more as sources, so it's not connected to the sound picture you're actually trying to achieve. So during tests I started to move the ambient microphones, which I tried with the couples like 1 meter apart, a small AB, maybe 10 or 15 meters from the front of the orchestra, much closer to the orchestra. And I found that much more convincing result. So in that sense, that is the starting point. And for stereo now, I often work with the middle microphone using an MS. So I have the Omni and additional figure of 8 that I only use in the stereo mix. And that makes it really nice to be able to use both setups for the same mix.
Georg, you have worked for music and for sports. Also here different miking techniques, I guess.
Yes, of course, very much different. I think for the 3D approach will be almost the same, starting with the decker tree, adding surround microphones, adding height information, usually working in good rooms with omnis and in bedrooms with artificial reverb. No. In sports, of course, it's a little bit different because I can't put the microphones usually where I want them because either I have no access to the position where I need them to be. Unfortunately, Siemens still hasn't built the famous air hook that can be just put in the air and holds the microphone wherever we want it to be. Also, drones are too loud to move the microphones where we want them to have to be. So, for one 3D experiment in a stadium, we were using the 3D ORTF from Sharps as a main audience, plus, of course, many additional microphones. So if you think that a football game is an easy broadcast, Well, you have many close-up microphones for the close ball sound, so that you hear the kick of the ball. You want to capture the different fan parts accordingly. So in a later step, maybe we can even offer the possibility of an angle of listening angle for the viewer at home. So I'm a fan of Bayern, I'm a fan of another club, and according to this I can choose in which part of the fan in the stadium I want to sit. So sometimes we have to work what's pre-installed in the stadium, it's not a very easy or very clear approach, so we try to make from existing systems 3D sound as good as it gets.
Thank you. Tom?
I guess our approach is really driven by practicality, so particularly for live events, like you say with sport, but for classical music, live event broadcasting as well. We want to just put one array up and be done with it, rather than having to rig maybe 10, 20 individual mics. They sound beautiful if you can get a spaced array of omnidirectional microphones in a lovely hall in front of an orchestra, and they're tied to loudspeakers and they're reproduced over a loudspeaker system. It can sound absolutely delightful. We've found there are slight timbre effects, comb filtering effects when we reproduce that in binaural, so actually more directional arrays work better for that. In terms of other recordings like studio drama recordings, it's also not practical to have actors acting around lots of individual microphones, so more compact array is preferable.
Have you found in working for VR that the recording technique is quite similar to when you would work only for the loudspeaker grid, which is then binauralized?
Sure. I guess there are two main types of VR. One is the completely created soundscape or world that you're entering, and the other is the sort of more 360 video world where you're trying to represent what is really there in real life. And obviously the techniques are going to be different for those. For a 360 approach, you want a more realistic impression of what's around the camera, and you want a mic that's not going to sit right in front of the camera. So something that sits underneath or above is preferable. But for the more created world, we're finding we're using lots of different techniques. So the VR piece that we've just launched, the Turning Forest, we recorded some real world atmosphere, ambience of a forest, and we used a spaced mic array for that because there was no movement. We were just setting up a sound field of the sound of the forest. But then for the action that happens in the drama, children run around, so we literally just tracked them with a stereo mic, which could then be panned into the position that we wanted them in the space. And mono sources, stereo sources can be panned as you want like that, and you build up a picture much as you would in stereo.
So you use the freedom that you can place virtual loudspeakers everywhere, in contrast to here where you have a format.
Absolutely.
Very good, yeah. Lasse, which microphone technique do you use?
In general, yeah, I use many systems, and I would say it's depending on the situation. You have to make a recording, and it's not possible to say you have always take this microphone or microphone system. It will work every time. Therefore, you should see what you have to do, what kind of room you have. As if you do indoor recording, I nearly always make indoor recordings. But if I have to make outdoor recordings for film, sound design or something, I often use only 2 microphones for stereo recording, and then double or make 4 instances of that tracks, and then make a kind of 3D sound of this. There are also many ways to make 3D channels or sounds for 3D. And therefore, again, you have to see what the situation, what you have to do, what is the best thing, and the best way to get the result, and the channel system.
Okay. Last not least, Mike. We have heard your microphone techniques. A quick summary.
That's all I do. So many things I disagree with, I don't know where to start. Again, I'm sorry, I feel a lot of the things are being done are just archaic. But starting off, well, first of all, there's something which I wanted to say in the previous question that was asked. There is a very fundamental reason why we're doing 3D, and that's because an instrument, let's say we're working for music, an instrument radiates in all directions and differently in all directions. This projection of one part of the instrument, which comes back as reflections, first reflections, or even contributes to reverberation, is the process of integrating the sound so that we get the full appreciation of the timbre of the instrument. Now, the only way of doing this is with a 3D array. If you do it in 5 or 7, just get a pancake. If you want to get a real perception of the timbre of an instrument, then you have to integrate as much as you can all the other different types of radiation, quality of radiation. And this is, for me, is the reason for it. This is different to sound effects of airplanes going over the top and all the rest of it. This is, for me, the fundamental thing. Now, coming back to what's being talked about, ambisonics, for me, is a bit of a joke. Now, I knew Gerson quite well, and I spent quite some time talking to him about things which were not right with ambisonics. And the main thing about it was that he had no idea of what perception was all about. He was a brilliant mathematician, he was a brilliant physician, and he did not know what it is to listen to anything. He did, when I eventually found out where he did his experiments, I was horrified, and he was in his mother's front room, and there was no way in which he could have had any let's say, rigorous analysis of what was being done. When you go into the actual theory of how it produces, when you reproduce the sound, there's some very fundamental errors in there, completely fundamental. And then, but then you see, Gerson, when he produced the microphone in the first place, was for stereo. And then he had a brilliant idea of being able to change the directivity pattern in different directions, and that really worked. That was first class. To my mind, the problem was the twits who came afterwards, and then they started saying, well, we can do surround sound with this kind of thing. But if you start analysing the parameters, you find that it does not cover correctly the sound around you, or even worse, the vertical sound. Now, vertical sound it needs a difference in time. It's a time difference function which really creates the effect of the first, well, I'll call it a segment because I work in segments. And to be able to get the idea of height, you need to have a time difference element. Now, if you're using an ambient microphone, this is just ridiculous. There's nothing to do with it. All you're getting is level difference vertically, and this is why, in fact, this microphone is so insensitive, it doesn't produce decent results at all. What you need if you want to get even approaching, is just two balls, one above each other, separated about 60, 70 centimeters. But even then, the tops of the ball and the one down at the lower level don't produce the distribution of localization that you're looking for. Now, if you go to higher order ambisonics, okay, you're beginning to get different directivity patterns, and this is beginning to approach the characteristic that you want to have in the horizontal plane to get reasonably smooth localization. But of course, everybody knows that in physics this is a catastrophe, because the higher order you get, the less bass you get out of it. So in other words, put the bass back in there, you've got to fiddle it, and okay, you've lost the whole point. Now, one of my biggest horrors is object-oriented mixing, simply because, okay, maybe it goes for cinema, for the big spectacular stuff that they do. I'm interested in what I call reality recording. In other words, I'm interested in what is being recorded all around us, getting the first reflections or getting the natural sound which is around us. And to my mind, this is why I place so much importance on the problem of determining which parameters we need to manipulate and in which directions. And this is why I have a completely different opinion on how this was done. There's one thing that I was interested in, that there are some people actually looking for a single array which will, I think if I've understood correctly, record the whole of this environment, and that he doesn't particularly want to change all the different multiple systems that we have to put up there to get a satisfactory result for each of the configurations. Well, sorry, I've got a bit of news for him. I've been using an array which will be compatible or is compatible with all the other systems that are in existence. Whether it be stereo, whether it be 3 channels, for quadraphonic, or whether it's 5 or 7 in 3D or not. I've been using this for a long time and published the work a long time ago. So I'm sorry, I feel as if I'm looking back in time, saying, okay, well, when are they going to catch up? I'm sorry to present this in this way because it sounds very pretentious, and I don't mean to be at all, but I feel that you've got to go and listen and work out and experiment all these parameters, and the problem is you haven't got the time because you're doing a job for somebody, and I'm not.
Of course, it's only one perspective, and you're living in the sweet spot, you once said, and that summarizes it quite well, because of course we have to care.
Sweet spot, but he doesn't say what I say just after that. So it's a sweet spot, yes, but oh, how sweet.
But of course there are a lot of other different applications that we have to care for. And also when Tom is speaking about object-oriented, he's also not only speaking about audio, of course. Audio is only a very little part of the production. We have to care for other things when we are talking about not only 3D stereo, like Aural 3D or Dolby Atmos, but of all the other things that we are talking about here as well that are very important, or even the bigger driving force as we are, and object-oriented broadcast, what Tom is doing. So Tom, you might very shortly comment on that, please. But also Erdo has a response, but first I have to ask, now the beginning starts to be exciting, but we are on over time already. Are we caught out here immediately, or what's our time scale? Can we have 2 other minutes, 10 other minutes?
No.
1? No, that was a yes. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, Tom?
Yes, so just in reply, Mike, our approach to this sort of object-based production is much wider. It's about interactivity, it's about responsiveness to what we're producing for the audience. It's not just about spatial audio. And actually, when I talk about object-based mixing in terms of audio, it's more about using the object tools to produce 3D audio rather than other panning techniques or whatever. So a mic within an array can be an object. That's all I'm sort of talking about from that point of view. It's more a channel which sits over there, but we call it an object.
It's just multiple models.
Well, I'm advocating using mic arrays like helmets.
It works for anybody.
No.
You guys are producing programs, and you've got every reason to have all these peculiarities to get the program.
But I think we agree that we want to achieve something that is as natural as possible. On the other hand, we have to.
I don't know, sure of that.
Well, you said so.
No.
You want to record the reality, the naturalness.
Yes, with microphone array, with
yes.
techniques of object oriented.
No, I'm saying different recording engineers try to achieve with music recordings naturalness. The problem is that our microphones, although they are extremely good, and they don't work as our ears when we produce the sounds through loudspeakers. So we don't get the same balances, the same timbres that we are aiming for by just putting them somewhere. We have to choose for certain locations, for certain sounds, different types of microphones that give slightly an accent in order to be able to play back to these musicians who have very good ears, who hear that in the rooms they're producing, they spend an awful lot of time with tuners on Steinways, with Stradivari musicians who have years of training and can hear very small individual changes within the approach of their sounds to get close to that again. And that's a problem with a so-called ideal situation with a mic array that should record reality as well as possible, that then it doesn't convey something that we need to convey. We have to deal with that. We have to work with that.
I don't believe in the ideal situation. I don't think this is nonsense. I'm absolutely in agreement with you saying that we have to change characteristics of the tools that we're using for different
tool has a characteristic, so we choose it already by using one microphone. It's not there's not a neutral microphone, so we choose the microphone that we like. Very good ones. But the difference between an MK2 and an MK2S is already applicable in certain.
Well, you try an MK21 now.
MK21 and MK41. Beautiful microphones, and I love it.
I'm sorry, I've got to leave you. So best of luck to you, and I won't be interfering with your discussion.
Günther, was there a comment from the audience? You are also invited to participate in the discussion. Do you want to comment, please?
Sorry, not on this subject. I have another problem. Tomorrow we need 120 Kopfhörer to be installed here. And here is some sound check now. And this is really difficult now to have a long discussion anymore. So, by the way, if there is somebody who has a little bit of time, please, you could perhaps help to install all these headphones. And afterwards we have a get-together with beer.
So that's the point where we go on with that
yeah.
discussion. I think you know, as we know, that we only scratched the surface here of that very interesting topic. We will continue it in 2 years at the next Tonmeistertagung. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your